Hello all, we're going to have a look at 215 markers for family. So the first one we're going to have a look at is explain the reasons for changes in the role of grandparents in the contemporary UK family life. It came up in 2021 it came up. So explain... it came up in 2020. Explain the reasons for changes in the role of grandparents in contemporary UK family life. Explain the reasons for changes in the role of grandparents. Really narrow question. The mark scheme literally gives three names to suggest to the examiners: Brannan, Ross et al., and Allen and Crow. So really, really, really narrow. So we'll start these with one reason for the changes in the role of grandparents. So one reason for the changing role of grandparents is women working. So one reason for the changing role of grandparents is that women are now working. So we're going to do Wilkinson and the gender quake. The feminisation of the economy. Gender quake, feminisation of the economy. So a shift, again, in the economy has benefited women. So we're going to do Wilkinson and gender quake. With Wilkinson, I am going to do Brannan there, who is in the New Extended, and he argues that beanpole families have strong links between generations. This is largely because middle-aged women provide kinship care to grandchildren. So intergenerational ties, beanpole families, or the vertical. So beanpole families or vertical extended families. So just so you know, that's 3 or 4 generations. So children, grandparents, great-grandparents, grandparents, parents, children. So vertical extended families or beanpoles. Extended families have strong links between generations or intergenerational ties. So very, very close with grandparents and grandparents, largely because middle-aged women often now provide kinship care to grandchildren. With that one, so Brannan really is the focus of the question, but I've just added Wilkinson to kind of beef it up a little bit. But there I'm also going to make a note of Gittins. I'm just going to argue now that children are often now seen as objects of consumption. So they largely bring pleasure and joy to grandparents. So largely grandparents provide kinship care because they really enjoy their grandchildren. They bring them pleasure and joy. So really Brannan is the big sociologist with the other two to just add supporting points to make it a little bit more, give it a little bit more range. So this shows that a changing role of grandparents is to provide childcare / kinship care, to provide childcare or kinship care whilst parents work. So their role is to provide kinship or childcare whilst parents work. Largely as this brings joy and helps families with the cost of living or the cost of childcare. So largely the new key role is that grandparents provide childcare to their grandchildren whilst parents work. This brings them joy and it largely helps families with the cost of living or the cost of childcare. Very expensive childcare, I've heard. Right, that's paragraph 1. Paragraph 2. So the second reason for the changing role of grandparents increased life expectancy, which has created closer bonds. So the kind of reason, I suppose, is increased life expectancy. And this is largely creating closer bonds, again, between grandparents and their grandchildren. So here we're going to do Ross et al. These are largely from the, again, the extended family section of the diversity griddle pack. So Ross et al., the intergenerational ties are stronger than ever, with grandparents and grandchildren valuing each other and seeing each other regularly. The intergenerational ties are stronger than ever, with grandparents and grandchildren valuing each other and seeing each other regularly. Here we're going to add Phillips and Downs noted that grandchildren visit on a regular basis. So noted it was weekly. So we're going to do those two sociologists. Because they tie in together. You could, if you wanted to do that as paragraph 1. That one's maybe a little bit bittier, but still a strong reason, I'd argue. So this shows that changes in the role of grandparents has led to closer bonds between generations in contemporary family life. So change in the role of grandparents has led to closer bonds between generations in contemporary family life. Largely as a result of increased life expectancy. Largely as a result of increased life expectancy. So it means you know your grandparents, you see your grandparents and great-grandparents, and value time together, which again seems like quite a nice little 15 marker. Just quite positive. So women working, providing kinship care because they really enjoy spending time with them. Life expectancy is generally a reason why the role has changed, and therefore it's led to us valuing time with those relatives. And then a third reason for the changing role of grandparents. So this is a bit of I'll explain this one. The third key role of the grandparents is the increased conflict or blended families. Sorry, folks, I tried to find somewhere to, I don't know if you can hear background noise. I think I'm just above the staircase in the office, and I think that's why you can hear, or you might not be able to hear everything, but I can. I can. Changes in the role of grandparents due to increased conflict or blended families. So that's the key role of grandparents has changed. So the role of grandparents, let me change that. The role of grandparents has changed due to increased conflict or the rise of blended families. So here, and I'll explain what kind of role they play. So you've got the Burgoyne and Clark found that blended families suffer from problems that other family types do not. And Hart found that there are increased opportunities for conflict in contemporary families. So two quite narrow sociologists. And then I'm going to say, this shows that the role of grandparents is to provide help and advice to help support children and grandchildren with increased conflict in families. So the role of grandparents is to provide help and advice, help support children and grandchildren due to the potential for increased conflict in contemporary families. So in the Mark scheme, it just had Brannan, it had Ross et al., and it had Allen and Crow. I don't think they really mean Allen and Crow. So we've given them the three sociologists they've asked for, but what we've done is we've added in additional sociologists to just develop those points. So that was a really, really narrow 15. Again, came up in 2020. The other one we're going to look at is cohabitation. So we're largely going to look at this cohabitation one because it came up 3 years in a row. So it came up in 2014. Then it came up the year after in 2015. And then it came up in 2016. So it came up in 3 years in a row. That normally should give you an indication that students didn't perform very well on it. So the exam board just keeps asking it. Really, yeah, it feels a bit like it's punishing. But yeah, so paragraph 1, 2, 3 is what we aim for. Again, if it's a really common question, it's important for us to make sure we can address it. Also, I don't think it's too bad at all. So 3 reasons for increased cohabitation. So the first thing I'm going to do in this cohabitation question is just say that cohabitation, keep on highlighting everything now, cohabitation is when opposite sex couples live together without children. And the ONS has found that there's been a significant increase. If you can remember, it's 2.2 to 2.9 million. But just that a definition, and then it's seen a massive increase. One reason for the rise in cohabitation is due to the decline in stigma. Really common reason in a 15 marker. So I'm going to do coast from the cohabitation section. That more people have experienced cohabitation. So people expect it as a valid living arrangement. And teenagers now expect a period of cohabitation, even when marriage is the long-term goal. Ooh. Teenagers now expect a period of cohabitation, even when marriage is the long-term goal. And I'm just going to add there, Beck. We have increased individualism and choice. And largely we have all this freedom and diversity due to the decline in stigma within society. Gives you more freedom to have whatever family type you want. And in this case, freedom to have the cohabitation. So I'm going to do those two. This shows that we have increased cohabitation as the decline in religion and secularization has led to a decline in stigma. So individuals have the freedom to live together without being married. Decline in stigma, decline in religion has meant that we now all have the freedom to have diverse family types. And in this example, cohabitation is what's the result. Okay. Number 2, increased cohabitation is because marriage is no longer, or women no longer need marriage. No longer need marriage. Or, I'm sure you guessed it, women working. Really, again, really common one to use, really helpful one. So I'm going to use again, one of my all-time favourites, I suppose, the Florence Buchanan. That marriage is no longer economically necessary for women. So fewer choose to marry. It's no longer economically necessary, so fewer women choose to marry, or few people choose to marry. Wilkinson. So you've obviously had that gender quake, shift in the economy, or feminization. Instead of doing Lambert, fit women financially independent in their 20s and 30s, because they are independent, but they are living with a spouse, or so not a spouse, they're living with a partner. So I did sharp there instead, just that women now prioritise careers and financial independence rather than love, marriage, and children. I suppose in fairness, we could do Lambert, particularly just the rise of those fit women to they're financially independent in their 20s. Because I suppose the point we're trying to make here is that they live together with a partner but wouldn't marry because they don't need the financial support there. So yeah, we could do Lambert, I suppose. There. So this shows that there's been an increase in cohabitation. This shows there's been an increase in cohabitation as women working now means they're more likely to cohabit rather than marry, as it's no longer needed, nor is it a priority. So women no longer need marriage to be economically viable, and it's no longer a priority given that they're focusing on careers instead. That's kind of why I put in their kind of chart that it's not their focus or at the front of their remit anymore. Okay, women no longer need marriage and therefore choose to cohabit instead, and they'd rather focus on their careers. Paragraph 3. We're testing the water. Cohabitation is normally a way to test the water to check if they are your soulmate or ideal. So, paragraph 3. So, a third reason for the increase in cohabitation is to test the water. To test the water or to check how viable or appropriate the relationship is. Most people now would never marry before living with somebody. It would be considered to be, very unusual. So here he's in the evaluation, or they, sorry, are in the evaluation, notes that it can be really difficult to generalize about cohabitating couples, about reasons for increased cohabitation. Some oppose marriage, and others are testing the water. For Giddens, we are seeking our confluent love, a pure relationship, and one where we're provided with, because generally argues what women are seeking, or what we want is deep emotional intimacy. Your soulmate, your perfect person. He does also note that though that men are not socialized, sorry to be quite heteronormative, but men are not socialized to provide this. So that's why you've potentially got more increased conflict. A pure relationship provided with deep emotional, and men are not socialized to provide this. I'm going to add in a bit there to try and link it in. So cohabitation can be a way to test if the relationship is pure. Just to tie it in. You don't have to do it with everyone, but I feel like I'm veering off ever so slightly. And then largely going to add in Morgan, who notes that we cohabit because we fear divorce. Not really the same as the other two there, can't lie. But I felt it fit in there slightly better than it did in the other sections. You could have popped it in there if you wanted to, but I popped it in that third one. So this shows we've had increased cohabitation because we have higher expectations of relationships, and cohabitation is a way to test if these relationships will stand the test of time. It's a way to avoid a divorce. So it's a way to test that the relationship will stand, that it's working, that it will be right for us. And it's also a way for us to avoid a divorce, paying for solicitors and, I don't know, a year, 18 months of heartache. Right. Those are the 3 paragraphs for cohabitation. I've taken the cohabitation section of the diversity grid or pack. And then what I've done is occasionally just added in a couple of others to just give it a little bit more substance in places. It's generally what you find you're going to need to do in those 15 markers. As always, any questions, let me know. See you next lesson.